Our first seminar topic is electronics update. Nick Velato of Nautic Alert. Nick is the Vice President of Engineering for Nautic Alert. Incidentally, these bio notes are contained in your folders, and I'm just going to pick out a couple of highlights. It's a new product line focusing on intelligent monitoring, security, and tracking for recreational and commercial vessels. Nick is a lifelong sailor as well and comes from a family of sailors. Interestingly, Nautic Alert was born in the wake of tragedy where an unexpected adjacent boat fire consumed the family sailboat and others, and it was awakening for needed advancements in marine situational awareness and preventive countermeasures. Giving us an electronics update, Nick Velato of Nautic Alert.
So today I'm going to be speaking primarily on yacht security and a little bit on how that affects sales for brokers, OEMs, how that all kind of ties together and fits that picture. So when you think about yacht security, typically you think about a boat that's left unattended somewhere, somebody going and breaking in, stealing an outboard engine or a dinghy or something like that. But often what's overlooked is the element of travel. Many boaters take their boats into places that they have to lock themselves in the cabin at night or are concerned about people coming on while they're on board. And so there's been a lot of cases where within the charter industry and recreation, people will have pirates actually board their boat and take their belongings while they're on board. And so advances in technology make it possible to protect the external perimeter of the boat as well as before an intruder makes entry. And so there's some real interesting new technologies that I'm going to show you here. Traditionally, when you think about securing the outside of a boat, you think about PIR technology. That's pretty much what's used in everybody's house, and you see it on the wall. And basically the way it works is you've got a lens over the cover there that directs light to a center point, and so it creates an array of zones. And so if it sees motion, it says that there's a motion event, and then you know that there's an intruder. But in the marine world, it doesn't work so well outdoors. In fact, it doesn't work so well indoors in some cases. What happens is you have lots of air drafts in combination with deck temperatures from the surfaces. And you also have people that are walking on the docks nearby, boats that are moving around, swaying lines in the wind. And I use Ring as an example here because they say that it'll detect motion up to 20 feet away. But in fact, what happens is when a boat being pulled on a trailer goes in front of the house 50 feet away, or the UPS driver comes by, it's going to set it off because it only knows object size. So it's a 2D technology. There's no way for it to measure distance, and it's really just a guesstimate. So a better technology for that is microwave technology, and it combines PIR technology into a housing that can actually send out a microwave signal and see objects. So it knows that there's actually an object there. It's not just thermal noise. And you can actually set a distance setting on there to make it very precise for what it's picking up, as well as adjust the field of view. So it has superior rejection for false alerts in an outdoor environment. And it's ideal for protecting deck objects, as well as using it to detect somebody coming up in a dinghy before they board a boat. It's also available in similar wired and battery-powered wireless form factors like you're used to seeing with PIR sensors. Another excellent countermeasure is FLIR's autonomous perimeter technology. So this is literally a bullet-style camera that you can set up, and then it has basically an embedded web browser on it that you can open up, and then graphically you can set up a boundary like shown here to give you a very precise way of detecting objects in a certain field of view. And what they've done here is they've set up a perimeter by the red square, and it can distinguish between a human and an object as well as a vehicle. And you can set up those rules and also a tripwire and direction for movement. So it gives you basically military grade intrusion technology that you can use on a boat. and it doesn't require a network video recorder to use it. You can have it work standalone, just like a microwave sensor or PIR sensor. Radar technology is a new technology as well that's ideal for high-end because you can actually conceal it behind a ceiling, behind a cabinet, and it'll shoot through the surface. Its strength is its weakness, though. You can't beat this technology. You can't get past it, which means if you've got a water droplet in a pipe in a wall, it's going to set it off. So this was actually made for a restaurant chain who they were having their branches broken into, and people were getting around the PIR sensors in there. So they came up with this, and now this is being used in high security applications. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but in a stable environment like this, it's ideal, and it also has range detection settings on it too, so you can adjust the distance that it sees the objects. And then, of course, all the other security sensors that you're used to can be used as well. So that includes PIR for indoors, as well as microwave for indoors. And I recommend that if you have a situation where you've got an open door, wind drafts, high velocity air condition, things like that, if they're not just going to be using it when they're not around, as well as contact sensors, glass break, pressure sensors, pull sensors, smoke and carbon monoxide for safety. And then in terms of video, an NVR is basically a network video recorder. It's like a DVR for the boat. And it allows you to capture video from 8, 16, or 32 cameras, which can be either hardwired or wireless based. It gives you a way to store video on board as well as access it remotely in the cloud. And one thing you have to watch out for here are port forwarding issues. Most systems will give you a problem if you're connecting through a marina and you want to access it from your phone, say. But there are solutions that can get around that pretty easily, which is nice. So as brokers, it's great that we can detect intruders and things like that, but the question is, well, how does this really help you guys sell boats? Well, with the advent of this technology, essentially, to kind of compare the automotive market, you can walk into a GM dealership and spend $20,000 on a car and have better protection when you leave through OnStar and automated services like that. But the marine industry really lags in terms of similar protection. So if you're going to buy $1 million boat and you have it sitting unattended somewhere, you kind of want somebody to keep tabs on it. You don't want to wait until there's a high water alarm to tell you the boat's sinking. And so the latest technology can enable value add for a dealer, a broker, an OEM to be able to safeguard their customers, whether it's global security or it's monitoring critical systems, being able to predict a failure before it occurs for serviceability of warranty items. OEMs will spend a ton of money if a $1 million boat breaks down somewhere and they've got to get those people off and tow the boat. This kind of technology will enable you to be able to see trends and predict failures well before there's a problem underway. So some of the things it can do, global monitor security is possible. With anti-theft technology, this can help with lending and financing. So if you have asset protection for the lenders and insurance, that's going to leave them happy, makes it easier to lend. And same technology can be used for safety, warranty issues. It's a full situational awareness technology. So to break it down into the levels of technology, I have to kind of digress a second here and explain some of the background. So traditionally, the first types of monitoring solutions would basically send you a text message. Maybe you'd get an email alert, but it was very much a point-to-point thing, and it was very much here's an input from some sensor, and if it trips, let you know. There's the newer technology is going to be cloud-based, right? So there's this concept of a server somewhere that is in the cloud, and so the device can communicate with that. And it's an integral component that's used for many things in terms of messaging. And then the latest technology is going to be edge-based. So what that means is it transfers intelligence from the cloud down to the device on board. And that's going to enable the device to be able to make smart decisions, as well as use the components in the cloud for messaging. In terms of the technologies for the communications, if you look at what's out there, there's 2G, 3G, and that's all in the process of being phased out. So Verizon's already turned off 2G, and they've got plans to turn off 3G next year. So 4G is the longest roadmap for support, and it gets exceptional range. It penetrates through walls a lot easier than 2G, 3G. And then in terms of satellite, with Iridium and Inmarsat systems, we can do what's called geocoding of the location. So when a message comes in, we can actually see where the boat is approximately. So it's a redundant way to get a boat's location. And satellite also has low profile, as in some systems the antenna can be pretty bulky. In other cases it can be very low profile and actually concealed through the fiberglass and still communicate. So when you look at a traditional cloud-based system, you think about some on-off sensor that's going to communicate to a black box somewhere on the boat. It's going to transmit to that land-based server. There's really no onboard intelligence. It may use one-way communication, which is going to limit what you can do there. And you're completely dependent on that land-based server. With an edge-based solution, of course, you transfer that intelligence, and you'll often get two-way communications, ability to notify of measured events as opposed to just on-off sensors. And with a smart cloud, you can send parallel messages. So the idea is the device may communicate one type of event, and then the cloud can broadcast that event to multiple parties over multiple mediums. And so you get a platform that can enable AI. You hear AI all the time nowadays, artificial intelligence. And basically, for the Marine, what that's referring to is the ability to correlate data sets and do predictive failure. So if you know how often, say, a pump is cycling, then you can predict with that and how much current it's using per cycle when it's going to fail. Or if you're using multiple battery types in a hull and you're using an electric drive, you can look at the data for each bank under operation and see how they're performing and be able to predict when there's going to be a failure. So coming back to the boat security aspect, for anti-theft, this may be something that's required for financing, and theoretically it's supposed to make it impossible to relocate a tracking system without it being detected and reassure vested parties. But as it turns out, not all systems are created equal, which is good and bad because it creates a solution for every budget that's out there. But there's pros and cons that you have to worry about, such as what happens if you cut away the wall surface that the tracker's mounted to and the tamper's behind there. You can pull it off the boat. Or what happens if you go smash the unit with a hammer? Is it going to actually detect a problem? So the first function that it solves is, where is the boat now? And to know that, obviously you have to be within range of the network. If you remove the GPS antenna, does the network support the geocoded location to be able to still be able to get that location? And if it's one-way communications, then you're dependent on the boat to be able to update the location periodically, which means when you go to get the location, it may actually be stale data coming from the server. So the question is the data time-stamped? With a smart cloud, you can have it act as a watchdog for the communications. So if somebody goes in there and smashes the unit, it'll detect that the unit stopped communicating. Another equally important aspect is, where's the boat been? So as an insurance company, they may want to make sure it stays within certain boundaries, doesn't go too far offshore. And so to do that, you may need to buffer tracks if you don't have connectivity. But if you buffer tracks and then you reset the device, are you going to lose it? The other thing is, if it works over Wi-Fi only, you have to wait to get back in the marina. Or if the device is VMS type approved, meaning that it meets the requirements of NOAA for commercial fisheries law enforcement. They have a requirement that says not only do you have to be able to buffer the tracks to non-volatile storage, but you have to be able to reconstruct the tracks after a power-on event. So you get full track reconstruction. In terms of geofencing, so you basically want to be able to set up boundaries and make sure the boat doesn't travel outside of a certain perimeter. The way that this has been done up to now is you can go and set up some rings like that, and you're dependent on the boat to be able to update its location periodically, at which point the server will determine if it's gone in or out of that geofence. With smart geofencing, you can actually upload the geometry data to the device itself. So with that shift in intelligence from the cloud to the device, you make the device aware of where it is and where it should be, and it can completely eliminate the need for periodic location updates, which if you're running a fleet, that's the majority of the airtime that you're paying for each month for your data. So you can completely eliminate that and reduce costs big time. The other advantage to this is you don't have any missed transitions between going in or out of these boundaries, because if you're only sampling the location once an hour or once every couple of hours, then it leaves that potential to be able to miss that. Whereas if it's on the device, it knows if it's gone in or out. So this is a case study that we found in terms of safety. This was a race these guys were doing a number of years ago, and the device they were using was using one-way communications. It was updating vessel tracks, but they ran into an emergency situation and activated it, and at that time it didn't know its current GPS location. So even though it had previously been reporting the location, it had no idea what to report at the time, and so they never found these guys, although they found wreckage of the boat. Another case study from EPIRBs and PLBs is basically, if you look at this technology, there's no transmission confirmation. It's really a last resort in an emergency. You set it off and you hope and pray that somebody's going to receive it. It can take several hours for the transmission to be received. And what happens if you're constantly drifting in that time and you've got that delay to work with? It can definitely make it a challenge to find you. So it's really a last resort. With the latest technology for edge-based devices, what it can do is it can report your current location and previous location in an emergency, but then it also leverages the smart cloud. So the cloud can look at the previous location updates, as well as your geocoded location, if you're using Iridium or Inmarsat, and decide what's the most relevant. And at that point, it can send parallel messages to both a monitoring entity as well as emergency contacts. So you get redundancy there for location, you get real-time response, and you can actually two-way message with responders in real time. So you're not out there hoping and praying. So here's an example to kind of show what's going on. If, say that there's a single event reported, you could have an OEM that gets contacted for an emergency or SOS, or choose to have the message routed to a monitoring center. So the OEM can basically decide, do they want to have a third-party monitoring emergency events, or do they want to monitor it themselves, right? Because with that cloud and the messaging, it gives you the leverage to be able to decide which way makes sense. You could have a dealer notified for a warranty issue automatically and preventatively. You could have a harbor master notified for high water or expected mooring slippage, or if a shore power breaker gets thrown. And so with a smart cloud solution, you get exceptional customer service that you can offer that goes well above and beyond the norm for what customers are used to dealing with. So the GEOS IERCC is a third-party monitoring company in Houston, and they claim to be the most secure bunkered site in America. They can withstand a nuclear blast, supposedly, and lots of products use them for monitoring. And basically their deal is we'll notify the same first responders that you're going to get with SARSAT, but if they're not available, we'll send our own. So it's basically like an insurance policy. And with the latest technology, emergency response can be a first resort as opposed to a last resort. So it gives you a way to set up a check-in interval if you get into a problem and let them know what's going on right away. They understand over 240 dialects, so no matter where you are in the world, they can communicate with you. You don't have a language barrier. And then personal emergency devices are another excellent way to safeguard crew on and around the boat. So this could be used in a man overboard scenario, or if there's some sort of emergency situation, lets the crew know, and then with a smart cloud, it can let a number of third parties know as well. So in summary, with communications, IoT devices, and that's Internet of Things, when we refer to that, enable direct communications with OEMs, service yards, marinas via the cloud backend architecture. And it gives fleet or business owners a way to stay connected all the time. So it's a major competitive advantage for charter companies in third world countries as well as OEMs that adopt this and offer some sort of supervisory features for their customers. With microwave and FLIR-based sensors, you can not only have reliable perimeter detection, but you can actually trigger video events on board with the NVR. So you have a correlation between reliable events as well as video events that correspond to that. And you can also trigger that remotely as well. And so it gives a way for crew to notify each other. So in summary, when you're looking at security, there's the onboard aspect, and then there's also the away aspect that needs to be considered. It's the type of technology determines the value add. You could literally offer worldwide concierge service for your customers. And with anti-theft, it can make boat financing and insurance benefits easier through risk mitigation. So it gives you, it also can give you a way to have recurring monthly revenue as a secondary income source. So imagine that you sell this service to your customers at the time of sale. Now you've got an additional revenue source to count on. And other benefits can be predictive failures, warranty reductions, and more. I'm sure you guys have some questions for me.
If you have a question, raise your hand, please. And Jay's got a live mic here. Any questions? Right here.
Is there a brief on this?
Is there a brief? Actually, I should mention that Suki is videotaping these, and they'll be posted online at the website, and you can tap into that if you like. I'll leave it up to you to respond if you have a brief on it.
Well, I can send you I can email you a copy of this also.
Okay. Any other question? I have one question I want to ask you. Okay, you say you're shopping for a $20,000 car, so I guess this will never be the case. But if on what his yacht should have, state of the art, what would the system be? 50 words. What would the system be? What would it involve?
Right.
And what would the range of general idea of cost be?
Well, what I would say to that is there's basically 4 areas that you want to focus on. The biggest threat is unexpected water entry. So with a smart bilge controller, you can predict a number of issues before you ever get high water. And that's really key because if you have a boat sitting somewhere and it normally cycles the pump once every 3 days and all of a sudden it's gone off twice in an hour, you've got a problem right away that you've got to deal with. And the other thing is in terms of multi-bank, these systems nowadays are so complex, varying, lithium and AGM style batteries, multiple banks, feeding different subsystems in the boat. So looking at multi-bank monitoring and trending, I think, is key as well to be able to detect problems before you have an issue in any of those areas. And then in terms of security, either the microwave or FLIR sensors is an excellent way to protect the exterior of the boat. And I think that's key to making sure.
And what's that going to cost you?
You're looking ballpark. You're probably looking in the 5,000 to 10,000 range.
I would have thought much more.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Right there, one more. Well, there's a couple over here, so we might as well.
Monthly monitoring costs, and do you also, monthly monitoring costs, and do you also have the ability for air conditioner failure?
So in terms of monthly airtime costs, satellite has really become very inexpensive, and it's pretty much on par with cellular. So what we see is, for $20 a month, we can do a lot in terms of communications over satellite. And with the global coverage, it seems like a no-brainer. In terms of air condition detection, we personally, we don't have anything for that right now. There's a couple ways you could deal with that. I guess one way is with a temperature sensor you could have in there. Typically, though, what we find is more times than not, the breaker either blows on the dock or somebody goes and unplugs it and forgets to plug it back in. And so that's the easiest way of being able to tell that everything's offline on the boat.
Thanks so much.
Question for you. Let's say I'm Steve Dean and I've got a 100-foot burger listed, and the guy who owns the boat has opted to put a Nautic alert system on there. Is there a way that someone other than the subscriber can have access to the geotag on the boat? So if the boat's in Fort Lauderdale, when my listing says that the boat's in Miami, he could have a call from another broker that says, hey, I want to show your 100-foot burger.
Right.
Can you tell me where it is? And Steve knows that the owner has moved it up to Pier 66 from down in Miami.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you can do is, there's a couple ways to do that. As the admin of a system, you can add multiple users, and those can be either full-blown users or emergency contact. If they're an emergency contact, they'll only be notified for high water and in emergency situations, but they still have access to the web portal. The other way is we've got an Excalibur interface, which is designed for third parties. And so that gives us a way to assign users and more specific roles for what they'll be notified for from the cloud. So it's a transparent way of doing it from the device to give various entities access to be able to see different things and get notified for different things.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick.
Okay, well, thank y'all.